Good evening, everybody. We're gonna get started. If you could, I guess, take your seats, that'd be great. First off, thank you very much for coming tonight. I look forward to the presentation by our architecture team, our architects, Jeff Lisinski and that's the other. Thank you. I got those right. So we are, for those of you that don't know me, I'm Jim Marshall. I'm the chair of the building committee. And it's my honor to kind of introduce this work to you all tonight. For those who aren't familiar with our process, this iteration of the school building committee was formed in January of this year. And it was formed largely because we had opportunity with recent legislative changes to decide whether this town is able to or wants to capitalize on significantly enhanced state reimbursement eligibility. You'll see more detail about that in the presentation tonight, but the work of the committee has been over the past several months working diligently to really develop a series of project options that this community can learn about and decide and help us decide how to make this the most it can be for Willington, both the community as a whole, as well as our educational programming and the schools for kids. So with that said, I will interrupt and I want to get right to the meat of it. Mike, if you want to say a couple of quick words.
Hi, those who know me, my name is Mike McCool, I'm the first selectman. When I ran for office last year, we talked a lot about the school, and this was one of the things that was important to me. I went to school here, my kids have gone to school here, one's still going through school here. And what I advocated for then, and am still advocating for the people of Willington right now, is that we get the best information forward to the people, and that we get the best possible scenario for the possibility of building a school. Decision, of course, rests in the hands of people, but my goal was to make it as enticing as possible, not because I have anything to gain from having a new school. My kids won't be in it by the time it happens. But because I think it's an incredibly important decision for a town to decide if or when or how they build the buildings that they build and the legacy of those buildings. A lot of you know the legacy of this building is 3 different evolutions of construction starting back in, I think, 1922. This original section was actually built by the Hall Mill, the company that ran the mills down the street here, to educate the children of the mill workers, and then was given to the town. So my point of bringing that up is this building has a 100-year legacy, and the decisions we make about this project, do it, don't do it, what version, is going to have a legacy. It'll be either we built the right thing and we use it for 50 or 100 years, we built the wrong thing, we didn't build it, whatever. But it's a big, big decision. So we need the best information possible. When people go into the voting booth and they decide yes or no, they need to have the most information possible, because what we vote on possibly later this calendar year for a school project is going to affect the taxpayers, and most importantly, it's going to affect the children in the educational system in Willington for decades. Whether we pick to do it or not do it, it's going to affect the process. Part of that work was to work with our legislators to take what already came into place before I got in office, which was the high reimbursement rate, and see what else we could get. We succeeded in the legislative session in getting even more in our favor. We got the legislature to approve not only that high reimbursement rate, but what they call a space waiver, which basically means we would not be penalized when we hit the square footage that is based on the formula for the amount of students. And that is a big problem for small towns, because that formula doesn't work well for a small town. If you imagine the size of a hallway, whether you have 100 kids or 200 kids, the hallway is about the same size. But when you divide the cost of that hallway over 100 kids versus 200 kids, the math comes out very different. So when you get to a small school, you get kind of penalized on that math. We got the space waiver approved by the legislature, so we won't get that penalty. So We do have the people who really helped get that through were Jeff Gordon and Tammy Nuccio. Both were invited to come tonight. Both would have come. They sent their regrets. Jeff had 2 commitments out of town. Tammy has this as the 3rd on her list tonight. If she gets out of her other 2 things in time, she will be here tonight. But she would echo the same words I'm sure she has before. I'm echoing the words she's used before. Her effort to do all those things wasn't to tell Willington we need to build a school. It was to tell Willington, we're gonna put you in the best possible place to make the decision. So that is really the goal of all of this. I wish there were 5 times as many people here tonight, but thank you everyone who came, whether you're for it or against it, and please spread the word, get more people involved, whether they're for it or against it. They need to know what we're talking about. Thank you.
That's negative. All right. All right, thanks, Jim. All right. Good evening, everybody. My name is Jeff Brzezinski. I'm principal at Tecton Architects. I've been working with the building committee and the community on the study of the project for several months, along with Antonia.
Sure, I'm Antonia Ciavarella. I'm an architectural designer at Tecton, focused on programming and community engagement.
All right, so for tonight, the agenda and the content of our presentation, we already went through the opening remarks. We're going to go over, for those that aren't familiar with both buildings, we're going to go over at a very high level some of the conditions, the observations related to the existing conditions, some of the opportunities that exist on each of the sites, and some of the challenges. And then for the last part of the presentation, talk mostly about the options, the conceptual options, scope, the schedule, the costs associated with it, and then the reimbursement related there too. Then after about a half hour or so of presentation content, we'll dive into a conversation with the folks here in the room. We have a brief survey, just as a matter of record. There's a box there, so if you want to take some cards, write down questions as we move through the presentation, we'll collect those, and our goal is to answer any and every question you can. If you can't answer it tonight, we'll certainly get an answer to you and post those so it's on the same page as far as questions that were asked this evening.
There are,
So,
sorry, it just, there are cards and markers at the end of every row. So if folks want to pass those down, you can have them in your hands as we go through the presentation. Thank you.
okay, another piece of housekeeping item is the content that we've generated over the last 3 months and probably about a half dozen or so building committee meetings. All of that content has been posted to the website. The QR code, if you scan it with your phone, will bring you right to the website, and basically anything that we've discussed during those meetings, the PDF content is there. There's also a project email, should you not have an opportunity to submit questions this evening or ask them or think of something later, you can certainly submit questions to the project email. So what's important to us this evening is to talk about the base case, lay the foundation for the existing conditions, talk about how we develop the options and how it relates to basically personal that your representation received on behalf of the community. So why are we here? We do know that this project has a long history, studied several times. There's past referendums, but in short, we have aging facilities. Average age is about 89 years old. Of course, there's educational needs, right? So education has evolved over those several decades. It's changed and will continue to change. So 21st century learning, students learn in a different way, more on a project-based learning model, which relates to the physical assets of the building. So space needs have changed.
Hot button item is the capacity district wide, right? So there were a couple different, we're not experts in demography or enrollment projections. We use the data and use the math that the state gives us to size your building. And we know that there has been some debate related to that. For the options that we're showing you this evening, they're based on higher enrollment count, and that certainly can be adjusted as we go through the conversation with the community. So that's a component, that's an important component to the project. And then obviously the last one is to maximize reimbursement. We'll speak to the incentives, the reimbursement, how it impacts the project, and when certain categories of gateways to reimbursement approval will be achieved. So who's been involved? I mentioned the school building committee, community at large. Antonia had a couple different think tanks. So we're trying to collect as much information from students, faculty, staff, community. And again, we're here this evening to share the content that we've developed so far. And then of course the consultant project team. I know Scott came in, Scott Colliers, owner's project manager. Sorry for delaying the introduction, but we're part of the team, building committee, OPM, architecture, engineering team or design team have been involved as well.
Could you hold the mic up a little bit?
Absolutely, sorry about that. Okay, so what are we proposing this evening? Basically, the consolidation of the two schools into one, right? So the special legislation is wrapped around the grade level, one school, grade level configuration, pre-K through 8. We're looking at optimizing and developing an efficient building, not only from a building performance or energy efficiency perspective, but also plan efficiency. So we're looking at developing a options and a building plan that is efficient from a space perspective. Okay. We will speak to the community benefit. Oftentimes, school buildings are not just for education, they're community assets. So this evening, we're here for community conversations. So there's various different components in the building, like the media center, the gym, the cafeteria that often gets used by the community in various different ways. We'll speak to that. And then obviously talk about this space to grow and the flexibility built into this plan. So right now, as Jim had mentioned, the target is for a townwide referendum in this fall. If that is approved, you move to the grant application. So every year, June 30th is a date that you should keep in mind. That's the deadline for school construction grant applications. That's when the period closes every year. So it's a cycle. June 30th is the deadline. So we obviously will miss June of this year. So the target date is June of 2027. Okay, yeah, and for those that didn't hear that, there is a timetable on the special legislation. So the increased reimbursement rate sunsets basically June 2027. So this is the opportunity for that. And I can speak to some of our experience with other communities and their reimbursement rates and their special legislation that they received as well. But it is important to note that the higher level reimbursement rate, which is in the 90s, expires next June at the end of June 2027. So with any luck, we did go through the design process. Construction could start mid 2028 with a grand opening, depending on the option selected. New construction is probably about 18 to 20 months of a build, depending on where it is on the site, which site it's on. And phased occupied renovation takes about twice as long. So if you follow this path, you could be cutting a ribbon in a new construction fall of 2030. If it was a phased occupied renovation, fall of 2032. So these projects are 4, 5, 6 years long. These are very big decisions, and you've been studying this for quite some time, but they also take quite a long time to basically come to fruition and completion. So what exists today, considerations for your project, obviously the aspirational, I think, Mike spoke eloquently about the history, the character of the building, there's a legacy here. So protecting that culture and history, identifying the aspects of the community, resource, using the building as a community resource, and then academic success, obviously, because it's a educational at its core, and then the practical, right? So we have to balance the aspirational, the 21st century learning with practical, which is cost, budget, maintaining schedule. There's topography on the sites that we're studying, the grading, making sure we're looking at that. If you plan to proceed with a phased occupied renovation, it's minimization of the disruption to students, faculty, staff, and the community. Because it will affect not only the building, but the parking, the fields, some of the traffic as well. So we need to think about those things, and we're basically balancing the overall options with having a resilient building, long-term maintenance, and then function, right? So those are the three. So thinking practically about the solutions as we move through the options planning. So the existing buildings, Center School 1952, Hall Memorial 1922. I'm not going to read the entirety of it, but when you add the two buildings together, they're about 100,000 square feet. That's what the options are based on, regardless of the discussion, whether it's 533 students or 500 or wherever that may land. Where we are right now with the addition renovation, and the two options for the new on the existing or a new site, all of them are land around 100,000 square feet. So square footage really isn't at the moment a point of discussion. It certainly can be as we move forward. I mentioned, I won't go through this, but I mentioned you've been studying this for quite some time, various different consultants. We did review the materials. We also walked through the buildings. We have our own opinions. Our opinions are that you've got really good use out of your buildings, right? So they're public buildings. They get an awful lot of use. And it's time to look at them comprehensively, in our opinion. Some of the items that stick out quite honestly in both of the buildings is accessibility, right? Fully accessible buildings, universal access to public buildings came to fruition in the 80s with the ADA Act. And public institutions and facilities need to have fully compliant accessibility, site, parking, buildings, either building meet all today's accessibility codes. Things like acoustics, spaces, buildings, different types of construction throughout. So these buildings have evolved, and chances are that the current use wasn't the original use. So that comes into play with acoustics. Interior finishes are you'll hear a term from us, end of useful life. So as an example, a roof, a membrane roof, a brand new roof, if you put it on today, the expected useful life is about 25 to 30 years. Do you have to put a new roof on at the year 31? No, but the expected useful life of that type of component or that component of the building is 25 to 30 years. You can roll a dice and try to go stretch it to 50 years. You can do all of those things with any type of different system, but the way that we analyze buildings is based on that terminology. So things like the mechanical systems, same situation, insulation and energy. So these are what we call composite wall construction in the original building. So there is no insulation in the exterior wall construction in large portions of the building. And certainly other components like abatement and hazardous materials. And some of the vintages of the building simply have those components in, whether they're concealed under carpets or above ceiling, they're there. Just to emphasize that the accessibility component, this particular building has about 16 different floor levels. So just imagine yourself, when we do this in the office, having a disability and trying to navigate a building like this is quite challenging. So really trying to see it through their eyes. We just want to emphasize that piece. This is an existing site map So River Road is basically at an angle on the bottom of this slide. The yellow line is basically the property line. And on the top of the screen, you'll see the greens and the blues, those are floodplains. There's a hatch line, that's the setback from the floodplain. So the usable area of the site. I'm gonna try to walk over here. Is less than it appears, right? So there's a light line along the top. So your usable area is kind of in the middle portion of the site. So those are areas that you need to keep in mind when we start identifying possible locations for either new builds or additions and renovations. So the best way that we can understand where to put additions or how to renovate a building is understanding how the original building went together. So we went back and looked at some of the original site plans. The yellow is the existing building. At one time during this existence, and I'm sure many in the community know the history better than I do.
Question.
I'm sorry?
I have a question about what you're showing is the existing building, because that has an addition on the south end.
Yeah, so there you go.
We didn't start with that.
Yeah,
It was 4 classrooms on this level.
on this level, yeah. So the documentation that we had, we pulled this diagram out, and this is where we started. So we show the yellow as the existing building, the purples as possible portables at one time. This vintage was back in 1979. And then basically the channel and existing trail along the river line as well. What's more important when we're studying possible locations for an addition renovation of this building is the subsurface conditions. So starting on the left side of this slide, you see the light blue shaded area with the dark blue lines. That's a leaching field. And then when the additions and various different vintages were added to the building, you can see another leaching field was added in the underneath back parking lot that exists today. So it makes it a bit challenging to place an addition to consolidate the building. So I spoke to the history and telling the story and maintaining the culture. So we did spend some time understanding what's important to the community from an aesthetic, historical perspective, and how that can play a role in the design of either addition, renovation, or build. And then understanding and respecting some of the proportions, the culture, the aesthetic, and so we studied kind of the rhythm and repetition and how that can be folded into a potential design for either new building or addition renovation. So again, just understanding the history and context is an important piece in developing the options. And the next portion of the presentation talks about the possible options. So to date, we've studied 3 options. The first of which is additions and renovations. And while I realize these are eye-popping numbers, on the left side of the top of this is the estimated total project costs. And what's important when we talk about costs for this evening, total project costs is the entirety of the project. It's the construction plus the soft costs. And when we say soft costs, I guess the easiest way to think about it is if you took a building, ripped it off the ground and turned it upside down and shook it, right? Scott comes out, I come out, Antonio, all the chairs, all the loose furnishings, that's all the soft costs, right? So construction is everything that's hard and stays, and the soft costs are everything else to deliver the project. So it's turnkey, including contingencies, including escalation, the entirety, no surprises, 96.8 million total project costs for an addition and renovation to this building at about 100,000 square feet. There's pluses and minuses. We've debated this at length. About 48 months of construction. Total square footage on this, just because of some of the existing plan inefficiencies, is about 105,000 square feet. Okay, so the reimbursement, I missed the punchline here. The reimbursement on an addition renovation from the state will pay 95% of the $96.8 million. If you follow the rules, if you submit the grant application and basically follow the path that many other communities follow. There's a lot of different technicalities and details in this, but I'm gonna hit the highlights and just go back to a couple key pieces to comparing the options when it relates to reimbursement.
Is there an overhead cost of like 10% unallocated towards what we don't expect things to go to?
Yes, so that would be, I think, described as owner contingency. So the state, after the disaster that was COVID and then the subsequent escalation of projects, recommends that you keep anywhere from 5 to 10% of owner contingency, 5 to 10% of the total project in owner contingency. So the answer to your question is yes, that 5 or 10% is in that number.
Is it 5 or 10 or?
It's do you remember?
10 on the road, you just sign it out.
Yeah, so pretty healthy. I don't oftentimes, just because we show it, doesn't mean it needs to be spent. So what's important on these slides with the total project costs is you get one shot to submit your grant application. Right? Once it's approved, it's easier to have it and not spend it than need it and not have it. Because you're not gonna go back. So if you say, oh, let's put 20% off that and go in to save money, and then you need $5 million more, you need to file another grant or amendment to the grant. That's a risk to the community. So you can certainly spend less, and oftentimes communities will spend less than the project costs, but this is an important concept. And that's how we budget these projects at this phase of the work, which is the grant application. So that's a good question. Any other questions so far on that piece? Yes.
What is there a quid pro quo for this reimbursement? Like the state's giving us something, do we have to give them something in return besides following their timeline and guidance that the grant states?
No, there's rules and guidelines that you certainly have to follow.
Yeah.
But every other community follows them as well. So there is no catch to this, if that's what you're asking.
I was gonna say catch, it's like you have to have certain requirements in order to go into the building, because you're mentioning the 21st century. So they talk about projectors, laptops.
No,
There's side data center.
there's
Centers. Yeah, exactly.
the basic rules that the state has is the square footage allocation, right? So they do,
That's just a calculation.
it's the student population times of prescribed square foot per student gives you the size building. You have relief from that, but you're still in and around that range anyway. So, yep.
How would the curriculum and decided by the Board of Education affect the allocation of space based on how they're teaching students?
It's a good question, but we've done many projects throughout the state of Connecticut, and the basic math to get you the size of the building, the state has the guidelines on things like size of the media center, size of class, size of classrooms for pre-K, K. They do look at how you divide up the square footage, but there's not a hard and fast rule related to it. So to answer your question on the curriculum, what the goal of designing and building a contemporary educational facility is to give flexibility, because the curriculum is going to change at some point in the life of the building, because this building, whether it's a renovation or new construction, it's going to last 50, 60, 70, 80 years. So what you want to do is design a building that can evolve, adapt, and be flexible, because the curriculum is going to change.
The Board of Education developed what they called educational ed specs. And that was based on the programs and the curriculum in the schools, and that was submitted to the school building committee.
Yeah, so there's, sure, that's probably also listed on this, on my presumption. So the educational specification is one key component to the grant application. They want to know what your plan is, but that ed spec, the reason why that is so important is because the state will look at the ed spec to make sure if you said you're going to basically have an outdoor play field. And it's not in the ed spec, but you do it during construction. Then they can look at it and say, well, that's not going to be reimbursable because it's not in your educational spec. So the ed spec is a comprehensive project playbook, if you will, for the state to look at and say, are you doing what you said you? That makes sense. Sure. Yeah, no.
Get confused with the previous matrix of choices, selections for projects you were showing. Compared to the existing buildings.
I'm not done yet, though.
Oh,
Yeah, no problem. I made a special slide just for that, because
I want to have it removed.
no, we got you, we got it, yeah, absolutely. Let me, I'll ask you one more question, let me get through the options and then we can have one.
Just for the design, what are the number of students that we're taking into consideration? For just all the layout that you're putting out there? Does it take into consideration expanding upon current sites? Like today, Ralph was saying, the existing building is an addition to what was originally provided to us by the
Yeah.
Hall family.
Yeah,
Does your options take into consideration that type of factor?
yeah, that's a great question, so. We identify areas for possible expansion in the future. Most of the buildings that are designed today, whether they're newer additions, renovations, will set up the infrastructure, if you will, for it. So we'll run the mains and, you know, maybe it's at the corner of the building, we'll stub them out so it's easier to add. And make sure that there's no site utilities buried in those areas so that you don't have to undo something, 10, 15, 20, 25 years later, if you had to. Where it becomes a little bit more difficult is depending on the size of the addition and the growth of the enrollment.
That's unpredictable.
That's a tough piece on the core spaces like the gym, the caf, the media. So there is some wiggle room, but we always plan for the possible future additions. Yeah.
Number of students?
Oh, it's 519, and on other slides, you might see it 519T, so that's just 519 population.
Okay.
Yep,
Yeah.
no problem.
Sorry, I get that. But each of the options, they're all based on 519. So if we want to dial it up or down, I know that's been a discussion and it's a good one to have.
That aligns with the indication specification.
That, absolutely, yeah. Yeah.
Can I interrupt for just a second?
Yeah. go ahead.
Anybody that's talking, or if someone wants to see this recording afterwards, you've got to speak into a mic,
Oh,
or
okay.
they're not gonna pick
Yeah,
it up.
good point.
So
Sorry.
it's really important that if you're gonna ask questions, get to a mic.
All right, so why don't we do this? Let me finish the options. And then we will pause for some questions and I'll bring the mic over soon. Sorry, I wasn't following this again. All right. Yeah. No, we're great. All right, new construction. This middle option is new construction on this site, right? So there's a field in that direction. The orange is the proposed new structure. It would basically be one main level with a a level down for the lower elementary and a level up for the upper, basically the middle school. The reason why that works well is because of the topography, it kind of falls off down in that area. But it also allows each of the grade levels access to things like the media center, the gym, the caf, had a kind of a easier way to circulate through the building. Believe it or not, There's a lot of detail behind all these numbers, as Scott has put all of these together, in coordination. But this is $94.6 million for new construction. It does include, right, wrong, or indifferent, the removal of this building. Okay, so that would be reimbursable. We talked about this, and we know, there's both emotional, but also historical value in connection to this building, so that's definitely a point of discussion. But for this option, just clarifying the scope, it does include the removal of this building. So that's also reimbursed at, and there's a range here, 93 to 95, so it's still a pretty considerable reimbursement rate from the state. So the town share, on this one is 9.43. On the previous option, I guess I didn't cover it, 9.84 for the additions and renovations, cost to the community, 9.43 million cost to the community for new construction on this site. The building size is a little bit less than the additions and renovations, about 101,000 square feet. So again, they're all generally in the same range as far as the square footage. Can we optimize it a little bit? Sure, probably. As the design is unfold, we can certainly help that. The third option that we looked at was new construction, and I'm not sure how many are aware. New construction on, I guess, a tangent or adjacent property that's further down, and forgive me, it's behind the building that's called Cable Technologies. Stock and Cable Technologies. Yes, Cable Technologies, because that's what they were kind enough to let us broadcast. We walked through this. We walked the site. There is some topography. It's a decent site from a development perspective. The benefits related to this are obvious, that it's pretty much limited or to no disruption to an occupied school campus. It does bring some efficiencies. Obviously, you have the land acquisition is a cost, but it definitely brings efficiencies. They have all the laid out area they want during construction. It optimizes those costs related to this project. This is $95.7 million total project costs. Again, the range 93 to 95 and 9.96. So all around, just a conversation, $10 million cost to be. So between the three options, it's $9.5 to $10 million cost to this community when you schedule in the reimbursement. The building is 101,000, so a very similar size. Site acreage is basically 34.2 acres, about 24 of that is usable. What the benefit there, and we'll walk through some of the more large plans, is from a community perspective. We went to the Willington Day. From a community perspective, it creates this kind of long, if you're thinking long-term about next generations ahead of them, it creates this interesting campus with the fields, community asset, and then the structure itself. So long-term, for generations, it's a nice campus setting overall, but obviously, there's challenges related to that as well. Since that,
It's not butting a road immediately.
True, that is true. It's, yeah, there's definitely opportunities and challenges with each of the options. Peter, this is pretty right here. So the identified repairs. And it's not tongue in cheek. So both buildings need some work, right? So they're pretty old. We went over that already. One could debate if you could stretch, the roof another couple of years, or why do we need a new mechanical system? I went there for years. Well, if you want to meet current codes with fresh air exchanges, energy efficiency, protect your asset from thermal and moisture envelope, you're going to have to address roofs, windows, sealants, gutters, the mechanical systems, start looking at finishes and accessibility. So those are major components that you are going to have to look at. This isn't necessarily considered the option. It's not an option. It's if the community doesn't support, any of the free options that I just went over, you're gonna have to do something eventually. So I live in a community where, my wife tells me I squeak when I walk, because I am cheap too, but what happens is in a building of like 1950, they lost an electrical panel. Well, you don't pull an electrical panel from a 1950 vintage off the shelf. They had to order it, they had to ship it out, and our kids were home for days because they couldn't have school. So it's not gonna happen, all the time, but that's I think anecdotally, those you roll in the dice. If you want to try to stretch certain systems, you certainly can. Those are some of the things that you're gonna face as a community. So it's a little bit difficult to kind of add all these up and say, well, if you do this option compared to that option, you have choices here. The challenge with this option or this doing these identified repairs one at a time is you are going to get less reimbursement for these. There is some reimbursement for them, like roofs, the state will reimburse roofs. They now have they're called non-priority projects. So if you hear that term, the major projects are priority projects. The roofs, windows, mechanical systems are called non-priority projects. So they have like a rolling deadline for submission. But your reimbursement rate is going to be down in the, I think for this calculations, it was in the 30s and 40s. Your base reimbursements, I think 60, 65, but there's a term that we cringe when we hear it. It's called ineligible. So the state will come in and say, and I'll give you for example, to replace the mechanical system in this room is not easy, mostly because it's hard sealing, but replacement of the ceiling will likely be part of the mechanical renovation because you got to get to the ductwork. But the state may consider that ineligible because they're reimbursing you. If you were to file for an HVAC grant, they'll pay you for the HVAC under a reimbursement, but they won't pay you for everything else. So there's choices. This is a choice. The reason why they have, so for additions and renovations, they have renovate as new, and then they have new construction. Those are the priority projects. The reason why they have those and the reason why you have increased reimbursement is because long-term, if you have the buildings of this vintage, long-term, the choice when you map it out, often is do a comprehensive renovation. So, but again, every community is different. So we do have this. We can debate, how you want to add these together, how often, do you do it over a 2-year period, a 5-year period, a 10-year period. You could even put this out over a 20-year period. And I'll do the math. You're still going to be better off. At 95%, you're still going to be better off on priority projects. But again, to each his own from a community choice perspective. So we can go back to this if we have more questions on it.
Okay, yes, you elaborate on that reimbursement process. So somebody got to pay first before you're reimbursed. That's my understanding of the reimbursement.
No, that's not true. So you submit the grant application. It goes through a cycle. So priority projects, you submit June 30th. State will look at them. For
We just pick one of the options that you.
Yeah.
select.
The state's gonna look at it for 4 or 5 months. They'll put you, if you have a complete grant application, they'll put you on a priority list. And December 15th, that comes out. Then it goes through the legislative cycle, it goes to the educational committee, and then through basically the next session, the spring session. And ultimately, as long as your grant, at least in my experience, I've been doing this 15, 20, 25 years. As long as your grant is complete and things are in order and the funding and the community supports it, the cycle is about a year to get an approval letter. So once you have the approval letter, you can go out to bid. There's other gateways, obviously, you gotta get the state in hand, but you have your letter. And it's like basically, they'll reimburse you do as you go. As soon as you get your official grant number, that's the ticket to, basically, reimbursement payments. So we'll have communities, submit quarterly, monthly, whatever it may be. But on the major projects, it's basically pay and reimburse. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, it takes the state about 2 months to process the payment, so you're always about 2 months behind, but that's the worst case scenario. We always create the next payment request. So as soon as the payment's received from the state, then you're allowed to immediately submit your next payment request. So you're always running a couple months behind, but it's very close.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Okay, we're taking a little bit more time, so I'm gonna try to move along in the interest of time. So the additions renovations. Again, the light blue is the existing building that would be fully renovated. The orange is a two-story addition, basically at the parking lot. We tried to get a parent and bus on this side of the road, of River Road, to avoid having to cross. We think there's some sacrifices there, but it is possible. Right side of this shows a more detailed layout. The yellow rectangles are the buses, the blue are the cars. So you can see that site capacity becomes a bit of an issue. We are gonna lose some green space and fields. There's plans for those that want to study that, but it is possible, practical, to add a two-story addition to the back of this building and optimize the existing footprint. So we've done this, and from a design and educational perspective, for those that are interested in the educational components on the room, maybe all, what's important is a term called small learning communities, making sure that grade level learning communities are appropriate for pre-K to 8. So Massachusetts is doing a lot of pre-K to 8s. Rhode Island is doing a lot of K to 8s. So the continuity and less transitions is they're out there. So this is not, don't think of this as very typical. They're out there, and what's important is making sure that you can see pre-K, K1 together, 6, 7, and 8, making sure that they have everything they need in their small learning community, and then access to things like media, gym, CAF, without having to travel through another grade levels learning community. So from a building diagram perspective, that's how this was laid out, and that's how the new construction projects were laid out. This is where it gets challenging, and we've done renovate is new and new. I will say that we're seeing in the market that the renovate is new cost per square foot is coming really close to, if not exceeding new construction, believe it or not. It's because of all the complicated testing and materials and some of the vintages that we're building. We have to contain it, abate it, all in an occupied building. So it becomes quite complex, but your community, it's a little bit more intense because you have the on-site septic. So you got to figure out a way to get a new septic system in first, because if you're going to put an additional to the existing one, that won't work out so well. So that would be the first phase. Second phase would be building the addition, which would be about 14 to 16 months. Then you could go use so the key is to optimize and renovate. The cost of the renovate is new. You want to kind of build the addition first and use that as the swing space rather than renting or buying modulars. It doesn't really map out. We're doing it in Hartford only because we didn't have the ability to do what we're doing here. But if you have your choice, this is the best way to do it. So build the addition first, use it as swing space, and then just renovate a little at a time portions of the building. 6, 8 months, 10, 12 months at a time. And then come back in and renovate the offices. You probably will grab 2 or 3 summers where you can renovate spaces like this, the gym, the CAF, the ones that are used all the time during summer, if possible. But there are some sacrifices, temp classrooms and gyms and cafeterias, those kinds of things. It's not all that fun. I think the parents are worse than the kids. The kids love it, but the parents, it's quite disruptive. So then you would have to, at the end of all these additions and renovations, would have to reconfigure the fields and the parking. And we're projecting 40 to 48 months. That some options make sense, some don't. Everybody has that choice. So I think we're seeing a lot more new than the renovated new, only because of dollars and cents. One thing I failed to mention. Back in those three options, everybody remembers those, right? The renovate and the two new. If you can prove to the state that the new option is more economical than a renovate is new, the community is entitled to the higher reimbursement. Right? So that's one piece. That doesn't necessarily apply because we have the special legislation and the percentages. But renovation status, like our RNV renovation status, isn't given. You have to apply for it, and you will not know if you're awarded renovation status until the grant is. So that's just, there's a couple different layers there. What's our?
So the grant is submitted.
Submit.
not approved.
Yeah. Yeah, well, you submit a request for the renovation status, and typically you don't find that out. So, I know there's a lot we're throwing all that at you, but, those are some key pieces. So new construction on the existing, it does fit, it is tight, but it is possible. So, but you can separate bus, you can separate parent, you could have a nice, building, pretty compact, efficient. Some of the building committee members have, rightfully so, how do you get around the building, like safety? There's a lot of different kind of details, pieces that still need to be worked through. But these are, consider them like test bits that it is possible. You have some streams, some weapons that you have to work with, then some setbacks. Possible areas for septic, possible areas for geothermal. I know this is another debate. Most of our buildings, we're seeing some combination. In fact, depending on when this building is built, there might be a new building code. So you may have to put some level of solar into the project, depending on when you pull the permit, if you pull the permit. Long story short is, a lot of our buildings these days have some combination of these, in order to optimize efficiency and leverage, utility rebates like from Eversource and from the federal government. Those are footnotes, because those rebates don't come until like at the end of the project, so they don't really help on the front end. But they're still helpful. So this is a metric just to give you a little bit more detail. Septic, likely replacement is around 850 to 950. The building the field to meet today's current codes. Solar, if you were interested, is 2.4 to 2.9. Incidentally, those two components are included in the total project costs that we have shown. On the right side, that's not yet included the digital firming. Where it gets interesting, and there's a lot of math related to the reimbursement pieces. These are some fresh numbers, and we need to, do some energy modeling and calculations and ROIs and life cycle costing. So it's still in debate. So no decisions have been made necessarily on these. We're just clarifying what we have included at the moment and have not.
Sure, you speak to the geothermal water tower.
Yeah, so it is reimbursable. So all of what's up on the screen today is reimbursable at that 93-95%. So it kind of makes sense if you could pay a lower utility bill for the next 30-50 years. If you can get 95% of these systems, that the return on investment shrinks from what normally is 20 or 30 years, much less. So it's an interesting discussion to have. The state was not always supportive of that, but they are now. So, and then the rebates are real. They're in the hundreds of thousands typically, regardless of if you decide to do geothermal or PV. Just optimizing energy efficient light fixtures, outlets, the building itself, you're gonna see several $100,000, just that's as a baseline. So it's real money, to consider. Again, those checks come kind of at the tail end of the project. Right, I'll move faster, sorry. New building, kind of similar footprint, just turned on the new site. That's what it would look like. You can see the existing sites further on the right hand. So the image on the left, it's tucked behind the existing buildings. The image on the right is a more detailed view of it. So the whitewashed area, you kind of see the storage components, and the yellow are the property line. So it gives you an indication of what can fit back there. And it's relatively level. There are some slopes, but I think we could use those to our advantage. Building layout, I won't get into much of the detail from an educational perspective, but it's the same theory mentality as the small learning. I think we had a run around this one. All right, makes me feel good. So, options to consider, just as a recap. I think everybody can form their own opinions. Our job is to give you the information, straight face, and tell you what some of the challenges and opportunities are with each of these options. So you can see that here. Won't go over each one. We can sort of get back to it during the Q&A. And one piece I would encourage you to think about when you start debating either doing nothing or renovation of new buildings is the money that you actually put into the building, what stays in the building. And what I mean by that is this analysis. Left side is a renovation, right side is new. And if we were to spend the same amount of money, obviously, new construction's more predictable, right? There shouldn't be building mistakes. There shouldn't be unforeseen conditions. Maybe until you're out of the ground, but there could be. Opening up walls that are, 80, 70, 80, 90 years old, you're gonna find things that you didn't think you were gonna find, right? So those are change orders, something that I'm not familiar with, but they're much more on the renovation than the new. Typically, your general traditions, just because the length is double, you're gonna pay more. Things like trailers, fencing, the copy machines, the coffee. You're right, wrong, or different, you're gonna pay for those. The project requirements, same thing, just a different kind of category. It's all tied to the length. The biggest one that really is quite astonishing, and it's kind of like compounding interest, but in the negative escalation, is the escalation factor when you're talking about this magnitude, right? So escalation, we're required by the state during a grant application to escalate to the midpoint of construction. So if you take 4.25 escalation per year, escalates to the midpoint of construction for new versus a renovation. One is new is 18% escalation compounded. The other is 28.4. This is exactly there's a range there, but definitely you're paying a premium for that extended time duration. For those that are in the trades, you're locking up a trade for 4 years instead of 2. So they just like we can't predict everything in our market, neither can they, so they put that into their sorry. All right, that's my cue to turn it over to you.
All right. 21st century learning. So we know that as you're evaluating the options, there's certainly an educational component with this being a school, and we are hyper focused on that as well. So with 21st century learning, we're talking about responsible decision making that, as Jeff said, is flexible for the long term. So we're not trying to put. Okay. Sorry.
I think that's right, my
I
God.
didn't like. I might have turned it on too, probably.
Is it off?
There you go.
Power on.
Yeah, there we go.
Project very well.
That's my Italian heritage. So with 21st century learning, we're trying to be as flexible as possible. We're not trying to put in a bunch of bells and whistles that are going to be outdated in the next 5-10 years. So thinking smart about how we educate today, how we want to educate in the next 20-30 years, and building a space that supports flexibility within that model. We had the exciting time in the room that you are in today. We gathered a bunch of educators from Center School, from Hall Memorial, and we hosted what we call a think tank. And the think tank is an opportunity for us as designers to hear directly from the educators on what they value in education, how they see the building working for them in a big picture, visionary way. And it was important that they were all in one room. We played a couple of activities to get to the heart of some of these conversations. The first, we really wanted to understand in a pre-K to 8 school, what is that student experience from pre-K through elementary, through 8th grade, all under one roof? How can we give each learning community their own space to grow, but offer that mentorship model as well? So we created some constellations, and these constellations got to the heart of the experience by grade. There is a summary of this that will be posted to the website so that you can see each grade. But as an overview, if we click, if I did it right, it's going to animate through for us. We did pre-K and kindergarten, and you see each of them coming to the top. What we learned through constellations is that a lot of the experiences by grade level, as you can imagine, will evolve as you get older, but are rooted in the same principles. For example, students in pre-K are very focused on learning by doing. They're active, they're doing dramatic play, so their classrooms look very different from maybe the 5th and 6th graders who are also learning by doing, but they are in maker spaces, STEM rooms, they are in outdoor classrooms. We know that you guys have a trout release program. It's things like that that are important in the upper grades for that same educational principle. We also played a game called Alchemy, and this was intended to better understand what needs to be around the different program elements that we design in order for them to be the most effective. So when you think about a general classroom, within that small learning community, what really needs to be near you for you to be able to collaborate and be most effective, and for the students to be able to learn in the best way. And things like specialized education, resource rooms, connections to the outdoors, a quiet space, whether within the classroom or adjacent for decompression. All of these things came to the top in the conversation. And in a similar way, we explored general classrooms, STEM and science spaces, physical education spaces, and a comprehensive overview of all the programs in the school, even things like teacher workrooms, the administrative offices, to make sure that we're understanding a holistic picture of how the educational specification comes into a design. We know that there's research to back this up, so we are very passionate about leveraging environmental psychology, the impacts of the choices that we make in the built environment, from the selections of materials to those mechanical systems that we talked about. If they're noisy, students aren't going to focus, not bringing in the right amount of fresh air. It's, again, harder to be in a space that's not comfortable. So leveraging evidence-based design to make the best possible outcome. And we know that these decisions matter not only for student focus, but for teacher satisfaction and retention. And ultimately, that's why we're heavily investing in these programs, is to really make smart decisions that impact human health in a positive way. This is maybe similar to some of the rooms. It's probably about 100 years old. Not how we teach today, right? This classrooms in the past did not have the technology, did not have the specialized education, did not have the 21st century learning that we have here today, where we are really hyper-focused on providing spaces for project-based learning, breakout and collaboration spaces, flexible, adaptable spaces, spaces for the community to come together, whether it's an adult basketball game in the gym or a community presentation. We know you guys have a fantastic drama program that just had a play. What if they had a beautiful space for that to be and serve a wide audience, and then connections to the outdoors. And these are a couple of the slides that we showed the teachers in the think tank to get the ideas flowing. But we also showed these pictures, thank you to the superintendent and to Jim, we showed these pictures to students. And students offered their feedback as well on what they liked about 21st century spaces. You see those flexible classrooms, how the furniture can be reconfigured, some soft seating options to be able to get more comfortable in a small group setting and maybe brainstorm on a right-of-the-wall surface. Specialized education resources nearby, small group rooms, some sensory hallways. And then rooms that are specifically focused for the age levels that they're serving. We know especially in pre-kindergarten and kindergarten, those students are learning on the floor, right? They need a different environment to learn than an 8th grader. So making sure that we're fully supporting those different learning models. Flexibility, this was very popular with the students. The ability to expand a gymnasium into a cafeteria to really open up the space for multi-scale performances or athletic events, the opportunity to break out of the classroom. And the connections to the outdoors, fields, play, taking advantage of the wetlands if you're staying on this site or even expanding to the adjacent parcel, really leveraging the opportunity to get out into the woods. And this is what the students thought. So as you can see, 247 dots on the flexible and adaptable spaces where those gyms and cafeterias are open and expandable. Daylight was very popular, but flexible classrooms, breakout spaces, and athletics also very popular with the students. And so with that, we're going to move into the next phase of interactive discussion, but pause first, I think, right, for some Q&A. So I'm gonna put this move back on stand. Thank you, everybody. Okay, perfect. And well, we need to move this back to where it was.
You're okay.
Okay.
So I'm not sure how the cards went, if we have.
Do we have some? Okay, I'll put those. Thank you so much. I'll go all like these for them, but. Thank you very much.
So we will pick the note cards and answer as many questions as we can. And then for those that have questions, follow the rules that you can go up to my, I think, state your name, address, and the question. And then we also have an interactive kind of survey that does everybody have an iPhone? Smartphone. Sorry, smart. Something that you can so as we move through the Q&A, it would be helpful for you to connect to the Wi-Fi and if has Wi-Fi. And we'll try the interactive survey as well to try to get this feedback. But if does anybody have additional questions that we didn't answer as we moved through presentation? So yeah, that would be.
How many contractor bids are you guys soliciting for these jobs?
So, good question. So do you mean from a builder perspective or?
Yeah.
Yeah, so most of the projects that, we see these days are delivered through, a CMR deliveries, construction manager at risk. And if you follow the, selection process that the state prescribes, you'll likely see anywhere from a half a dozen to a dozen, pursue the work. And then the process, for that selection typically is a short list of, about 4 or 5, and an interview panel. So if you do decide to go to CMR at risk, the construction manager will then take bid packages for all the various different components of the building, and send those out for bid. So I'll take electrical for an example, and you'll likely get for bid coverage, you'll probably get anywhere from like 6 to 8 different or so, maybe a little bit more on each of those packages. It kind of depends on the bid climate. I mean, one of the projects recently that we had, I think we had 12 site contractors bid, so I think it depends on the CMR, the outreach, and the bid climate, but that gives kind of an average, so it's pretty healthy market right now. I don't, there's a lot in kind of headed into design, and a lot of larger, mostly high school projects and I guess some elementaries that are wrapping up construction, so there is a zone in here where it could be a decent bid overall. That answer you?
I think it's 25 to 30 total package trade.
Oh, yeah, so the construction manager will divide up the scope, the total scope into probably 25 or 30 different bid packages, lighting, fire protection, finishes, all kinds of things, yeah.
I'm curious about the property that the new school would be built on.
Sure.
Do we pay for that property or is that a deal?
That is a great question. So there was a question, and I'm gonna turn that to the chair of the building committee, because I think it's most appropriate there. So the question was, if you didn't hear, was the property and is it gonna be gifted or acquisition?
Thank you. Thank you. So, the property will be purchased. As of right now, the committee has entered into a letter of intent so that we can do the necessary due diligence to vet the viability of that property prior to getting to purchase and sale, and to ensure that it is developable for the use that we're intending to use it for, which is a new school. So yes, the purchase and sale agreement is the next step in that. Ultimately, any decision to purchase will be contingent upon voters approving the project on that site or that project option. And that is what we're working on. So the costs for that property purchase are included in the cost for that, for that option. Correct. So that is included and factored into the budgets at this time. The details of the purchase and sale will come, as that gets developed through the selectman's office.
And it's purchased. So what advantage does the person who's selling the property have?
I
Are
don't,
they making a lot of money on this project?
so the property is listed for sale. That is how it wasn't listed for sale previously. That's how we came upon it as we did our due diligence and property evaluation effort. So we are evaluating part of the grant application for the state. It requires 2 appraisals on the property, which obviously will ultimately be factored into whatever purchase and sale agreement they do. The property, I think, Scott, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but if anything above the appraised value would be ineligible for reimbursement. So that'll be a consideration as part of any final negotiation on the final price of the
How
property.
much is the property?
510,000, I believe, was the asking price for the 3 parcels that are being listed and sold together.
How many acres?
Versus
30. 18.6 or 18.
Do have, yes, give me 1 second. So the new site is actually 19.7 acres. And when combined with the existing hall site of 14.45 acres, the total site area is 34.2 acres. Within that, only about 24 acres of those 2 combined lots are usable. And the reason why that matters to a degree is the state, and you guys can fill in on this a little bit, the state recommends appropriate site sizes for different types of school buildings. In the case of an elementary school, it would be, I think, 15 acres. Yeah, so it's 10 acres plus 1 per 100 students. So we're looking at a 15 acre site for an elementary school. For a middle school, it's 15 acres plus an acre for 100 students. So we're looking at 20 acres. So the range of really what is required for a PK through 8 site is in the 15 to 20 acre range. The existing hall site option only has 9 usable acres, so you can see kind of why. And I think the Tecton team's slides and design options kind of showed that it is a very tight site, is what we have now. But the additional property purchase allows added value, allows added athletic fields. And
Get it any less,
I'm sorry,
can we get it any less than that?
that's
We're gonna negotiate.
Negotiation.
to be negotiated by the selectman's office, yes. As part of the purchase and sale. Right now, we have list price, we will go through appraisals, and we will go through future negotiation.
That's awesome.
And the purchase itself is reimbursable, yes. So at 95%.
Oh, so the.
Correct.
Yeah.
I got a question.
Hold on, we're gonna take. Go ahead.
So in addition to the renovations option, and let me start there, I have a few questions, but with that, everything goes here, what becomes of center school?
Oh, did I get that?
Can you repeat the question, please? We can't.
Yeah, so to repeat the question, with, in the consolidated option here at Hall Site, what happens to center school? Was the gist of the question, right? So it remains a town asset. Ultimately, but it will not be used for a school if all of the students will be in this location. So what to do with that is a larger community conversation. What the school building community, and it's not directly associated with project costs, it will now be reimbursable by the state, anything that happens in center school. What I will say, it's not developed yet because we are still working on all of these options. Exploration of what potential costs for that, for what to do with that site for the town will be something we explore, whether it's the demolish and make safe, whether it's maintain, you know,
You know, the issue is that I'm hearing is that it's not good for all those uses and particularly not for acoustics because of the way it is, but it's also wicked hard to schedule because the cafeteria sort of feels like they have dominion over it no matter what. And there's a, you know, you could say that's a communication issue, but I think it's a sort of squatter's right ownership kind of issue. So I wondered if you could talk about that, because I've heard that at more than one
Sure.
town school.
So, the question I think is related to possession of some of the core spaces like the cafeteria, the gyms.
And also the use as being pretty different for a cafeteria versus a musical performance.
So, so I think that points to the challenge related to acoustics and using a room like this in multiple different uses. I think points to that conversation needs to happen now, during the planning. So that we can discuss, as a community, every possible use for a space like this, so that we can accommodate it and the specifications and the educational specifications first. And then also in the specifications on how you would build and design the project. So I think, that points to, you know, the planning phase of the project. So if there are aspects, right, wrong, or different, the school buildings are community buildings, so we often, include a variety of uses, so it doesn't hamstring you. Whether or not you end up using them for all those different uses, you want to have the ability, to do that and get reimbursed for it. So I think it really points to more communication early on in the case. So, thank you. Sure.
I have a question that it sounded like you weren't ready to give concrete numbers on, but I was just wondering if you could help explain to people what the ongoing savings would be if we were to heat with solar and geothermal as opposed to doing fuel oil, and how that works out long term.
Sure, so the question was related to energy consumption long-term and alternative energy sources. I can tell you that, I don't want to answer kind of off the cuff. I can tell you that engineers are a part of the team. We've given them data to produce basically what's called the life cycle cost analysis, so that you can see the payback. For those that are in the industry, know without reimbursement, these systems, although they've come down in cost, still the payback isn't there. What the game changer is if you get 95% on that system. If somebody else is gonna pay for an enhanced energy system so that I can lower my utility consumption for the next 30 years, it's worth looking at. So I'll let the math kind of speak to it. So we're doing that now, and we'll provide that out to the community. I don't know honestly where it's gonna land, but my guess is that with that level of reimbursement, the payback is gonna be far less. It's a community choice. It's not a choice that we make. We just leave the options for
And
consideration.
by payback is gonna be far less, you mean far less time?
Far less time.
Time
Time,
to
sorry.
get back what we earned, not, okay,
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
that could have
sorry.
been interpreted two ways.
Yeah, I'll clarify. So historically, the payback on that takes 35 years. But when you have incentives like from the utility companies and incentives on reimbursement, the payback is much shorter. So it's like anything, if you're gonna pay for something, if you're gonna pay basically less in a shorter time period, it obviously it's worth considering. So I'm not doing a great job explaining that, but what I will tell you is we'll create a graphic that is based on the calculations and provide that out for.
And we'll
the source.
explain to what geothermal is to people who may not.
Yep.
Just like to piggyback on that question. Are the new designs looking to get a lead certification, like green building or something like
Sure,
that.
so the question was if you didn't hear, LEED certification, so it's a program that's been around for quite some time. I will tell you that, it's, the state has referenced LEED silver equivalent for the Connecticut high performance building design is really what we need to follow. And that's prescribed by the grant application. So you have to meet by default, as a prerequisite, we need to meet the Connecticut state, high performance building standards, which are all defined, pretty well defined. And they're quite honestly getting old, so it's pretty easy to meet that goes. That's also.
And, are we thinking anything about solar when we do this?
Yes.
Sure, so there was a slide in there, the solar, is included at the moment. And again, that's a choice, it's not a requirement unless. The state adopts the new building code. So the new building code, they postponed it, but if it does, happen, which it probably will. You're gonna have to have some level of solar, or alternative energy source based on the new codes. So the numbers that we have shown, total project cost, include a solar array. Basically, it's called like $2.5 million.
That's a lot, that's a lot, probably has a lot of sun, that lot.
Yeah, we put them on roofs, we put them in ground mounts.
I know.
Yeah, they can go. In a variety of different locations, but. The long and short of it is, there's about $2.5 million included in the numbers that were shared.
Just, make sure you guys have time to get through what you're going, we can stand it.
Yeah, we'll take a few more and then, yeah, go ahead, please.
I've worked at a lot of different schools, newer, older, recently. I worked at a lot of different schools. I work in elevators. I go to a lot of different schools from Oxford to Milford to New Haven. A lot of the newer schools, specifically geothermal, I believe it's Chatfield Elementary, if I remember correctly. They have a lot of issues with their geothermal. They've replaced a couple of the tanks 3-4 times in 4 years. A couple of pumps have gone bad. That doesn't mean this is happening to everything. That being said, we do have iron in our water. As far as other things like the membrane roof, I'm concerned about replacing those very often. There's a building in New Haven, a school that I just had, that destroyed the elevator because it leaked through the roof onto the elevator. It's completely, they gotta basically replace it. It's membrane roof and I see constant issues with them. I don't know if we can change to a metal roof or something like that. But as far as like all these different fancy things, I think if you're looking at the new building, I think it's a great idea. I think a abatement of this place, I mean, you've got all these different, if you look at the roof, you've got water gauge on almost every single corner of this room. And basically have to tear down the entire walls and ceiling to fix it, but.
So.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah, I guess my question is, are there, how much can we move these ideas in the building? Because if there are things like, keep it simple, can we just keep it simple to don't add all these extra stuff?
Yeah, it's simple.
Great question, so there's probably 6 different types of roofing that will be explored, from modified pit to metal. I think metal came up at one of the building committee meetings as a recommendation, so the options are there, as far as the various different types of systems. From a building system perspective, like the canopy systems, we are seeing a centralizing of the larger pieces of equipment, so there's less moving parts spread throughout the building to keep it. Today's buildings are quite complex, but if you can diagram out a simplified building with less equipment in centralized locations, it often leads to an easier maintenance program. So those are all conversations that can certainly be ahead of the committee and looking at options from, roofing types to window types to facade types. So that's all still on the table and decisions have been made. All right, we'll take a few more and then if we could maybe navigate through did you want to do this survey?
Yes,
If we can, that would be great. So,
I have a question, yeah.
yeah,
Where and how can the community provide input to each of the things that they said, decisions for design of like the cafeteria layout, things like that, space utilization, building facade, structure, architecture, where and how can get the input from people?
great question. Thanks for the comment. It is right there. Let's see. Yeah. Oh, sorry. So thanks for the reminder. I mentioned this at the beginning. The project email. There's many building committee members in the audience, so if you have comments, share them out. Those are the conduits for the information sharing. If you have comments or questions or concerns, now is the time to state them. But I would say, I guess, to answer your question, the easiest way is the project email, because you can do it at any time, or you can absolutely call them yourself.
The school building committee meets the second and the fourth Monday of every month. You're welcome to come, sit in the audience. We have a wonderful back and forth present to speak at the beginning where you can share your ideas. So please come, we want you all to come and participate with us.
And we frequently meet on the off weeks too.
Yes. All right, one more question I thought yeah, sure.
Just more on the $10 million differential that taxpayers in the town are going to be paying for. What's the payout time frame for that $10 million over time?
We might as well.
All right, so what I will say, I don't know how easy this is to read on this screen from this distance. So what I will say is that work is ongoing for the committee, right? We have met recently with the town's financial advisor. And through the work of our AE team and our OPM, we have the project budgets. Colliers has developed a preliminary cash flow based on reimbursement for the state. So that identifies, really what the town is going to need year over year to fund the project, and then it factors in reimbursement from the state along the way. We provided this information to the town's financial advisor, as you can imagine, with multiple options. She's only thus far at the time to give us preliminary information or preliminary debt servicing structure for one option. So what you see up here is new construction on new site. And we structured this, and there are probably 50 ways to Sunday that we can develop this with input from the community, with input from the Board of Finance. The initial direction that we provided to her is to structure this in a way to leverage our existing reserve savings that we've been accruing over several years now, which is $3.6 million currently, with $1 million projected to come in the next fiscal year. So to leverage that funding to minimize or negate tax impact until such time as the school is in operation and we can realize operating savings through the efficiency consolidating two schools into one. So I can't see some of this because I got a picture on the screen. So with that in mind, she had run two options for us for this scenario. This is the more cost effective of the two. We have the data from the debt financing structure to kind of relay to everybody. But long story short, what this does is up until 2030, which is the year where the primary bond takes to cover that $10 million. Before that and after that are a series of note payments as well, so short-term financing to cover project costs leading up to the full bond hitting and to cover. And Scott can probably do a better job explaining this to me, but once the project is complete, there's an audit period with the state. So there are a couple of years where a certain portion of the funding is held back, 5% of the reimbursement from the state. So we factored that into this as well. To try to leverage the point to where we get to the point where you run out of capital reserve savings to offset the cost. And we have a building that, sorry, I should be quoting Phil, but we have a building that can capitalize on both efficiency of systems, fewer repair costs, energy efficiency, as well as operational savings, which are significant, moving from two buildings to one for this town. So what you see before you is costs start accruing on the schedule that Tecton had provided earlier. Costs start accruing in fiscal year 28. But we can spend utilizing existing reserve savings and recognizing that we're retiring a library bond payment at that time as well. That is currently about $150,000, $160,000 a year. We can straddle that number up until 2033 with zero tax impact to the town based on this structure, which is the year of the highest debt payment over the 20-year term of the bond. The advantage of that is, and even at that 20-year term, it nets to about a $700,000 principal payment or recurring debt obligation. The advantage of delaying that and structuring in this way, at least through our initial discussions, is that the offsets in a worst case scenario of $500,000 for staffing efficiencies and going from two buildings to one. That's reducing duplicate roles because we have two separate facilities now. In addition to operational savings, this becomes a net wash. As at least this option at this time, and the way we ran it. Additionally, something to be cognizant of, and it's up on the screen as well. So the blue lines here are really what's the important net impact of this. We tried to kind of stage it so it could be followed along. What's also not factored into that is we are currently saving $1 million a year in capital reserve for a future school project. The reality is all of these options, that sunsets in a year. So that's $1 million that comes out of the budget at a savings. When all that is factored in, we're looking at a net decrease that you're going to see over the next 4 or 5 years of 1.5 to 2 mils out of your taxes. If we can implement a consolidated school project. If we do something like repairs, where we're not capitalizing on any of the operational efficiencies, we don't have those offsets. And in all likelihood, because the costs are significantly greater for phased repairs over the next 20 years, we're probably not going to capitalize on offsetting the limited time reserve savings that we did. That may continue on. That may become a bond payment that then changes 5 years from now when we need to do the next round of repairs, because $30 million is a significant cost to this town. So that's really the nuts and bolts of this. The reason why we're exploring this is because these reimbursement rates are really that advantageous to this town. It frees up the capacity through the capital reserve savings alone for this town to entertain many of the other projects like fire stations, which we also know are, of up and coming concern. It affords some flexibility in the budget to begin to think about doing something like that and actually have it not be an additional tax impact. Or it results in savings as a taxpayer if the town decides not to pursue a project like that. That's kind of outside the work of this committee, but the direct costs of this project, if all is realized in this preliminary structure, is advantageous to the town. And what we'll try to do, obviously, you can imagine the phase renovation is a longer and more complicated cash flow and bond strategy. So we haven't got that one yet, but we'll do something similar for that investigation. And we'll likely do something similar for, to the extent that we can, with your assistance, what $30 million of repairs looks like over a 20-year period as well.
Jim, is that scenario you're describing a 20-year bond or 30-year?
20-year fixed principal.
20-year.
We can run other numbers as well. she had time to do one. So, I mean, and this came in at 11:47 last night, you know. So we wanted to get this information out there. We don't have all of the answers yet. We're possibly missing things. But the conversation needs to start now, which is great, instead of 2 weeks before referendum time.
So, what are the milestones that we, in mind? I know that you mentioned it earlier that we have, I think December 15th, and then you have 4 months after that, and 6 months after that for a realization for, funds to be delivered. What as a town should we be considering for these options? So if we truly want to move forward on any one of these options, what is that timeline? What are the major milestones that we as a town need to decide on, to get there?
Our critical milestone is June 30th, 2027 for a grant application, because this reimbursement eligibility goes away. We're targeting a referendum in the fall. Originally, I won't get into the details, but we got clarification that we could extend past the June 30th date this year to file a grant application without impacting the project. So that was great. We're targeting the fall because it gives us the opportunity to have discussions like this and get feedback from the community before you're voting.
Yeah, right.
We don't want to push it too much longer because we do want to start the design process because time and escalation is money, right? So, but June 30th, 2027 is really that hard fixed target. Beyond that,
But as a
just
town,
official milestones.
as a town, we're looking for a referendum in September, October of this year.
We are targeting October 6th
Okay.
currently and backing away from that. The timing and obviously other inter-board approvals will repeat that a little bit. So the big thing to consider is that we need approval for a single school project as part of the application to the state. So we need funding approval for a single school project.
By October 5th.
Before that, so that we know what the referendum question is and what the dollar amount is. So we're gonna be working over the next couple of months to figure out the best way of implementing that to the community. I'm sure Mike has ideas from the selectman's office. But really to get that feedback on the options that we presented today as a viable path forward for consolidated school. So that we can go forth and really put what the preferred option for the town is. And further develop that, the cost associated with
That's
that.
we sent out as a survey. Just like how all your meetings are sent out by email.
Do you want to ask a question?
So I just want to take that, because we worked on this in the previous school building committee, and we learned a lot of things in the previous school building committee that we're trying to do differently this time. And one of the things that was really important learning for us in the last one was we tried really hard to survey the public about some of these questions. And the response we got was so small, percentage wise of the community, it really wasn't a good sample of what the community felt. So we learned we have to get the, you know, if we do a survey, we gotta get it out there even more, we gotta find some ways to get people to participate in it. So not saying it can't be a survey, saying that this is all a conversation, if everyone needs to keep getting engaged, you gotta go to your neighbors, you gotta say, I went to this meeting tonight at all school, here's what I learned. You need to come to the next meeting, you need to come to the next meeting, you need to go to a committee meeting, you need to watch the YouTube videos, because we don't wanna make decisions based on 3% of the voters. You know, that's not fair to the community to make a decision on 3% of the voters. So everything we can to engage people, whether they're for it, against it, aren't sure, we need them to participate.
Yep, use that email, send your questions. Try to participate in meetings. We are here to answer your questions. We want to get the answers. If you have them, we're trying to get
I
them.
think the first question is, are we considering as a town consolidating to one building, right? Because we can't move forward any of these options unless that single question is answered as a community. Do we want to consolidate or not?
I think it would have in the reverse order. I think it would be if we're gonna consolidate which project does the town most likely support without committing to it.
I think that's.
So, and then you have to go to referendum and have to decide if they support it. If they say no, then that means we're gonna do the repairs on the schools, but that also means we have to go every single year and get the next repair.
So one important note that Jeff the special legislation that we do have in place is strictly for a consolidated pre-K to 8 program.
Right.
So the solution to this, it doesn't exist without a consolidated school proposal, whether that's a renovation to this building or a new site. The reimbursement rates we're talking about don't exist unless that happens.
That might become the $30 million project to correct comparison, so.
Did you guys, what are we doing?
So, yeah, I think.
Jeff, was you, I have some questions.
Oh, yeah, it's a selectman, so I'm gonna give him the, yes, Rob.
In the budget numbers that you're planning to do, what kind of growth in school operating? The school budget that we approved. What increases over time included in your finances?
This is, so the baseline for this,
See the question?
yeah, sorry, I'll repeat the question.
What, yeah,
So, the,
percentage growth?
the question is what percentage gross is factored into the educational operation savings? Right?
No, what are we paying for ed each year? And how does it increase over the life of this project?
So this, the scenario you have in front of you projects Bill, you can help me with this as well. The Board of Ed is working through, the school building committee has asked the Board of Education to identify operational savings and, staffing reductions, so salary reductions, basically through consolidation. The numbers in here, this $500,000, we don't have those finalized numbers from the Board of Ed yet. Their expectations, which is why they're placeholders now, and there's an asterisk at the bottom of this that basically says pending further development by the Board of Ed. At 519 students, they're projecting their baseline savings is $500,000 a year in operational, Board of Ed operational savings. If we don't achieve that 519, that number only goes up. I think, Bill, correct me if I'm wrong, we were closer to $700,000 at our current enrollment level now. That is permanent operational savings of the Board of Ed. As a result of this project consolidating two schools into one. Additionally, we're factoring in about $200,000, subject to further refinement in operational costs. That's busing, that's diesel, that's energy efficiency. So this number, what we're trying to do is give not the worst case scenario, because it's a good scenario, in my personal opinion, but give the worst cost scenario so that things can only improve. These scenarios, for example, only anticipate 93% reimbursement rate. It could be up to 95, and that'll reduce that number. These numbers do not include bond premium incentives or discounts to the cost of the bond. That's not in there yet. These numbers don't include additional operational savings. If we don't hit the 519 enrollment that we're projecting, those savings from this. The goal being, this is worst case, it could be better and it could cost less.
Okay.
But we want to be able to commit to, this is what your worst case looks like for tax.
All right, now given that,
So again,
We can include security for our dear children. I mean, we would want to have security, so they're all our.
it is in there. I'll ask her, I'll get you that. Ralph, and follow up. I'll be right.
okay, by Dr. Proud's projections,
Right.
you're gonna see a decrease. We're gonna ratchet up about even to where we are today, and then it's gonna skyrocket. So that's that. That's what impacts space. And it used to be overlapped with the construction, the overall design and construction phase too. Is so that we're staffing, we may not have the new school yet, but we're gonna be staffing for a much higher student population in existing buildings.
I'm not the person to answer that. I believe our superintendent is, so I'm gonna bring him up here.
Sorry, Bill.
So he has, no, and we've asked him to do the analysis. That's why we had him on Tuesday. He's the savings of current staffing now. And in this scenario, if the enrollment were to increase to 519, that factors that in. That's captured in his operational savings, to my understanding.
Correct. So the number you're talking about, Ralph, is really, it's depends on how the spread goes. Right now, today, we could add probably a couple hundred students if they were evenly distributed across all of the grades and not add teachers, because you add them to classes that are small. If they're a class of 14 and you added 5 kids to every single class, you had 15 kids to every single grade level, right? It wouldn't change your unified arts. It wouldn't change your general education classrooms. So you could add a lot of students without adding staff members. if it were by, you know, you had 30 new kindergarten kids come in and suddenly you got 60 kids, then you might have to add staff to that grade level. But that's so this is why the two-pronged approach is, if it happened today with our current enrollment of about 370 versus the 519. 519 is the highest 8 years out. And that, at that 519, it's why Jim put the asterisk there, because he knows I'm not so comfortable saying it could be more than $500,000 in savings, but it might not be if we achieve 519 or 500. Or I think the Board of Ed is guaranteeing $500,000 in savings.
One of the other important points, Ralph, is if there's a bubble, that's gonna exist in our two school scenario versus a one school
Either way.
scenario, and there are gonna be costs in the way, so we can't factor every scenario into this,
Okay.
if it's not going to be directly related to this project.
So the problem I've had, I mean, I served 15 years on planning, so I shared on the planning conservation club documents, and you know, we look at boards, and we relied on a very good consultant. Projections, predictions made by the state of Connecticut have, particularly for our area, are notoriously way over reality, and it's been that way. Now, we look at the town of Willington. We've lost the predictions was it was going to decline. So the problem I have is we're going from 370 to 519. Where are students coming? Like, I listened to Dr. Crowder and left me totally confused.
So I appreciate you listening to Dr. Crowder. So he did put on a very informative discussion. It is hard to follow, I understand that. Realistically, though, the impact of this at 519, if it comes in less, the state looks at what that enrollment projection is, and that is what it bases its funding on. The higher number is advantageous to us in the enrollment calculation. If we did, which is why we presented these numbers this way, at $500,000. That's 519 enrollment. If you don't hit that number, we see greater savings, but it doesn't affect the reimbursement from the state, I believe.
The special legislation gave a relief from the space standards, so the calculation where I said number of students times the score for student, you got relief from score the number of student. So it's really a community discussion as to where that to be.
Joe, is if you build it smaller and they do arrive, state's not gonna go back and let you hold on, you're putting on portables at your own cost. Right, and so you can choose to build a smaller building, but if the students show up, state says, we built your building you asked for. Now you gotta put portables out there and that's on your time. So it's definitely advantageous to take the demographer's best opinion, that highest acre window, and incorporate that into your project. You know, it's risk and reward, but you know, for an exceptional reimbursement of 95%, do you want to risk under building and having to put portable classrooms onto a potentially beautifully renovated or new school?
I get all that. Unless
I do want to let somebody else, your question, I'm sorry, I want to go back in the ball. I guess move on to whatever we want to do. Was it security?
Yeah.
Could you repeat your question about security?
Yeah, I'm just wondering, if that is included in, the building, that was not security guard or.
Absolutely, so part of the grant requirements, we need to comply with the school safety infrastructure guidelines, so there's a guideline book. From beginning with the site all the way through the building and building systems, so it's all laid out very well, and we do have to comply with it to get the grant.
And does that include the school as well, if we don't build a new school?
Renovated school, yeah, a renovated school, a new school. There's a lot of communities out there going after the safety grant reimbursement. So there's a variety of different ways, but at the end of the day, there is a guidebook that we need to follow and comply with for new schools.
well, can I come into a building?
That level of detail becomes an operational discussion during the design. It doesn't get into the exact detail of the components we get into metal detectors. Some schools have, and some schools don't.
Yeah, they're doing a lot with that these days.
Yeah.
In Milford, I saw that on the news, that they put in, metal detection.
Yeah.
Milford's brand new school,
They're three schools there, all the schools.
they don't have it at the
They're doing-
elementary school. Oh.
It was on the news, last night.
Yeah, but I think we can expand.
Yeah, I mean, there's the sophistication of the technology these days. I think you can do a lot with it, other than, without having to put in metal detection, but, the way that we approach it and the way that the guidelines are set up, that was a layered approach. So there's design related, there's components, and then there's equipment related to it. So, it's a discussion, that once you get into the design, but it absolutely is covered in the budgets that we have.
Thank you.
You guys don't do the measure.
I think just in the interest of time, we involved everybody to the time limit here is, we won't go through, the interactive Mentimeter survey. But I think, what's important at this phase of the project is to get as much feedback as possible. We'll talk, and discuss with the building committee, the means for which we can do that, if it's an electronic survey or written or community forums, what have you. We will debate that and discuss it in small plan. We had one prepared. I think we're at our limited time limit here, so I just want to be respectful to this time. The other piece, thank you for all of the questions. What we'll recommend and what we often do is put together a FAQ so that all the questions that were asked tonight and all the questions that we didn't get to, we'll document and put a PDF on the website for discussion. Yes.
Sorry, I know everyone. Is there any way, if we do more community forums to have this information, maybe in the sense of our also out ahead of time, because I feel like a lot of the things that folks have questions about are already in the stuff that you sent in. As well as the stuff that's already been out there, the QR code or the communities or whatever. So the engagement part is really important. I just want to make sure that if we have an opportunity to have materials prior to, we could be directed to these things and to what we're going to focus on or whatever.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, duly noted, and we'll make sure that we get the information out there as quick as possible. But I agree, if we do decide these, maybe we can be a little bit, have a one pager to talk about the details of what we're, so people can prepare questions in advance.
Yeah, I mean, much of this information is out in prior presentations and this will kind of synergize here. What I will say is that this recording will be posted, or probably a staggered recording because we had some technical difficulty in the middle of it. Will be posted, I believe, tomorrow, and the technical team is also going to share these slides with us, and we can post that as well. This will be on the website, so this presentation will be available for some reference.
So, yeah, so I do want to, there's about a couple dozen worth of additional questions. We'll get those out. Very good questions. What happens to the existing school, the questions on operational costs, the tax and that very good. Cost versus debt policy. I'm not sure if this is a good question or a bad one, but how is the tech time chosen and what is their should we share that? The questions about learning and how the building will enhance learning is a good one to kind of articulate a little bit better. We talked about the growth in enrollment. I know that's I think a continued debate and worthwhile. Questions on the pre-care, first to 3 daycare. There's a little bit of confusion there. We have clarity from the state, or we will get clarity from the state and put that exact communication out there. So
we should probably just address that.
Yeah, it's basically, it's not daycare, it's pre-K, you're gonna qualify. We're we've been working with other communities under this same kind of language about the, basically the early learning centers and the birth to 5 description. And, all of them have come back with basically what they're trying to do is develop the pre-K. So the pre-K in different communities is half day, full day, from grades 3, 4, mentor, peer. So that model varies a little bit, but this is not, daycare.
Ages 3,
Age.
3 and 4.
Ages. Yeah, great. Sorry. Ages. It's been long. So I will make sure we, put that out there as well, but that's an important piece, because I think.
They added it because it wasn't included in the past.
Yeah.
And I had a project that had an early childhood center, birth to 3. The state just added that in to this, as part of the statute, the section 15%. I've got a project that just completed last year. It was for an early childhood center that included birth to 3, but the state didn't recognize it. So they didn't get reimbursed on any of that. It amounted to about $5 million. That because they had birth to 3, the state only recognized pre-K to K, to 3 to 5. So they put that into the statutory language this year, giving you that additional 15%. They recognize, what they have done to other communities, not recognizing birth to 3, but it is not a requirement to qualify for the statutory increase in reimbursement. So the state did a good thing, but caused a little confusion by that. Who'd have thought?
Yeah, no, that's, you can have that. So again, we will record these, put out at FAQ. I think the conversation's been fantastic. I appreciate everybody committing a couple of hours of time. Look, we're here, it's a big decision, I get it, and the dollars are eye-popping, but what is important to us and our team and working with the committee is making sure you have all the information you need to make an informed decision. Supportive of us, that's our job. So thank you again for the time.
And thank you everybody for showing up. I appreciate it. Please ask any further questions. Through the email. Well, I hope that more of these are part of the something.
Stuff that SBC meeting.
One super quick comment as everyone's leaving, just in case the people in here who asked the question about how are the architects hired. Or if you were thinking, hey, that's a great question, it was publicly bid, Collier services were publicly bid, Tecton services were publicly bid, all of that documentation is on the SBC webpage.
Good.
I just want to make sure taxpayers know we publicly bid.
No. Oh, yes.
Yeah.
All right. All right. Good to see you.
I'll see you.
Yeah, that should take a couple of days.